Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do a little video on the new Spider-Man buff. There's a lot of mixed feelings about this buff. I myself kind of have some mixed feelings about this buff. I was very excited for it, and then I saw the notes, and then I was kind of like, okay, whatever, they're not really doing anything with it. And then they changed it a little bit as it went live. Not enough for me to like really be into it, but enough for me to want to make a video on it and kind of describe the things that he can do. So right here I just took him against, I skipped Winter Soldier for this one because it's class disadvantage and he does not hit very hard at all. The length of this video is purely just because it's me trying to get through these fights with Spider-Man. So I skipped Winter Soldier and took him right to Captain Marvel. And he does have some pretty unique utility that I kind of wanted to show off, but the damage is just lacking. You can get it to a point where it's not pathetic, but it's really just not. It's not anything special, and I think that's really going to be his biggest weakness because he does have some cool utility. The webbing mechanic is interesting, not my favorite, but he does have a semi-permanent slow that he can put on the defender, and he also has debilitate, which is going to make your parry stuns longer, and all of your debuffs last a lot longer, including your taunts, which is kind of cool. And the combat power rate suppression is also quite cool. So he has a lot of cool things he can do. He definitely needs synergies to really, shine in any way. I was thinking about doing like a non-synergy fight, but I figured that would just take too long. So yeah, we're at 70 hits right now. We're about at 80%, so it's not really the greatest showing. However, we haven't really started to try to stack on the damage, which once you do, it gets a little better, and you don't need to put on his utility for this to happen. However, it does make it a little bit easier, and it's probably going to make it all the way a little faster. So it was like 37,000 damage off the special 2, which isn't nothing. And then there's a nice long stun chain that you can build some more of those taunts and get some more damage, so you get them in a pretty nice loop. But it takes a while, and you do have to weave in special ones if you want the webbing debuffs to stay up. 70,000 crit, not horrible. And the synergies that I'm using, I think the JohnDeauxMCOC one is the best one, probably. That's the one you're going to want to have most of the time on the team. There's a cool one to Shang-Chi. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it puts a pretty long and pretty potent physical vulnerability debuff on them. And that's what I was using just because, every now and then I will get a perfectly timed dodge or block, and then it'll be on for like 30 seconds or however long that is, so it's enough to be, of note. And then, I can't remember what other synergies I put on him, but those are the two main ones that are really going to amp up his damage. The Hit Monkey one gives him another ability at, I think, +6 webbing, or at above 6 webbing, which is going to increase your critical damage. Which is nice. So those are all things that you're going to want to consider if you're playing him, that he really can't do any damage. Well, not any. He can't do a lot of damage without these synergies. He's really a utility champ. However, the utility that he has is pretty niche. Slow's awesome. I take him in this Juggernaut fight just to show how quickly he can shut down Unstoppable for the rest of the fight. And the slow's nice. The debilitate is awesome because that works for all debuffs, including his stuns. And then the combat power rate just lets you play a little bit more freely, but these are not, like, they're not unique things to him. Like, Mr. Fantastic kind of has a similar thing. You don't really need to worry about evade with Mr. Fantastic because you're really only trying to parry heavy. And you wouldn't want to take either of these characters in a Mr. Fantastic or Spider-Man in a match where you can't stun. Because Spider-Man relies actually probably a little bit more on stun than Mr. Fantastic because that's where he gets all of his damage. So I don't think in any way that if you have Mr. Fantastic, you're pretty much going to have no use for the Spider-Man. Though he does do a couple of unique things, like he can bypass the Limber node. His stuns can't be decreased, except for by skill champions, of course. His stuns can't be decreased by any means, and they last a little longer, and they also bring down ability power rate. So he does have some Swiss Army knife kind of utility there, where his stuns can't be affected by Limber, which is really helpful, but honestly, there's White Magneto. There's a lot of things you can do to get around Limber without having to use Spider-Man. So that is a unique thing, unique to him, that only he can do, which is bypass Limber, and then some of the other nodes where your stuns might be a little bit more thrown off, but it's nothing crazy. It's nothing new, and it's nothing that's going to change the game. Though I do really like it. I like that there's a champion that can do that, because for a while Limber was a really big deal, especially before White Magneto. You kind of just had to figure it out. So this is definitely a step in the right direction. I hope to see more champions that can do this, but hopefully that can pack a little bit more of a punch. The sheer length of this video is really just because he can't really get any of these fights done. I take him in a path in Act 5 after this, just to show off some of his utility and some of his damage and a little bit less high health pool matchups. But these ROL fights took like 3 minutes each, which for a 6-star is incredibly low. This is a 6-star rank 1, so you do take that into account, that it's about 5-star rank 4 power level. But still, if you had pretty much any other, I mean, even Mr. Fantastic or any of these other science champions nowadays, they could probably do it a lot faster than this. So I do have to kind of say I'm a little bit disappointed. I think they had a kind of cool idea. I just think that it's not really my cup of tea. It's not really anyone's cup of tea. There's an argument floating around about how it's like, oh, well, he'll be good for new players that don't have a better counter. Not really. Slow's pretty accessible, and that's really the only thing that I can see him being needed for. And then if you're a really new player, you're probably not going to be experiencing a whole lot of limber nodes, which is the only other thing I can think of him for super useful for. So, I don't know. I don't really understand that argument. Here's another Juggernaut, but this is just on the path, so it's going to take him down a little quicker. I don't really understand that argument. I feel like they kind of just did him dirty. I'm sure they have some system for power level of how they do these buffs, but I think they just didn't want to make him super powerful. I don't think they felt that they had a place in the game for another super powerful science champion at this point, and so they didn't. Which sucks, because I'm a big Spider-Man fan. He was my favorite as a kid, like I'm sure many of you could agree with, but they just kind of didn't really put that much effort into it. They skimped out a little bit. It's a cool redesign. I really like his costume change. I like his profile pick. I like how they kept the evade in there. I like how they made the evade a little better. So, I mean, they did good work. I'm not going to discount that, but they just kind of purposely made him not spectacular. Excuse the pun, spectacular Spider-Man. I would like to see in the future maybe a rework of this buff, just to give him a little bit more damage, because I'm not going to complain about the utility. It's a little generic, but also it's useful. You can use it in a lot of situations. He's a good Swiss Army knife, but the reason that he's just kind of pointless is the damage. It's lacking pretty hard. He really relies on that special 2 for damage, which makes sense, but you have to get the stun, and that's not always going to be ideal, and you just can't bring him everywhere, even though his kit is based on utility. So it's just going to be a little bit of a rough road for Spider-Man. I don't think he's going to see a lot of use. I think there are going to be some situations he's going to shine. Against Shocker, I could see that. Shocker and Sandman both. He's going to have an okay matchup, but probably not any better than any other champion you could think of. Kind of cool thing he can do with Mordo. He can shut down the evade, which I would show off. Mordo's almost dead, but I show that off here. He can shut down Mordo's astral evade, so that's kind of cool. I think multiple science champions can do that, but generally, utility, fine, pretty good. B-, B+, that range. Damage is like a C, maybe even a C-. So he's just not that viable for a lot of people these days. And I think, given time, maybe he'll find some nodes or situations in which he can shine, but for right now, I don't love it. I don't hate it. I think it's better than it was, which is not saying a lot because it was kind of horrible. Another thing of his utility, I took him up against this Dr. Voodoo. If you have Despair, preferably maxed out, but I feel like you could do it as maybe 2 out of 3, probably not 1 out of 3. He can shut off healing like he's doing to this Dr. Voodoo with the taunts and the debuffs that just stay on. So he can do a lot. I think it's healing, evade, makes the debuffs longer, makes stuns longer against Limber. He can do a lot in that sense, but he's just not going to be your best option. I'm thinking there might be a path or two in 8.2 in which, you know, it has Limber or has evade and all that where he could shine, but aside from some really niche matchups, you're probably going to end up wanting to use other champions. I do think this is kind of a more pressing issue that needs to be talked about, is that, like, we have these champion buffs, which are good for the community, and it's, like, good, it's exciting, like, you feel like you're getting a new champion almost every month when they buff one, but I've been kind of noticing that they've been a little bit more lackluster recently, and I think this is just because, like, everyone can't be a Magneto, and I get that, like, every champion can't be the new best in the game at what they do, but I feel like Kabam's kind of just taking the gas off a little bit on these and kind of just doing it as almost like a side project, which I understand, but when you make these like promises, like, okay, we're going to buff a champion every month, and then you kind of like, what they did, they lowered it down where it wasn't every month, it was every 2 months, and then it's not 2 every month, or it's not 2 every 2 months, it's 1. So we're getting less of them, and they're becoming like less valuable. And I just don't love that idea of buffing champions, because like Spider-Man needed a buff. This is true. I would have preferred that they had, you know, taken a little bit more time with it, and even though they had the extra month, it kind of just turned out to be whatever. Another cool thing right here that I wanted to show off is when his opponent is stunned, he reduces their ability power rate by 50%. So if you combine this with the mastery that gives you 30% minus power rate and a Mr. Fantastic Previte, you can actually reverse power gain for the duration of the stun, which is really cool, but you're really relying on parry stuns there, and then you can also get a pretty good reverse off the special too. But this is kind of just a classic Spidey thing. It's about to happen right now, and I quit out. Something they didn't change. I wouldn't have asked for them to change it, but he is such a glass cannon. Though I hesitate to even say glass cannon because his damage is kind of whatever, so he's kind of just made of glass is the only thing I can say about it. So I get hit, I believe, by a special one, his first special one or second, and I die. And, you know, that's reasonable. I skipped it over, but that's reasonable, but he can't really take a lot of damage, so in these, like, you know, the new metas where the damage is a little higher and the HP is a little higher, he's just going to be worst of both worlds, because his damage isn't high enough to really run through that HP, and his health is so low that just a couple hits and he's kind of done. I wanted to show off this as I gave my closing thoughts. This is Arwell Red Hulk. If he had a little bit more damage, he would be kind of a perfect matchup for this, because he can ignore the physical resistance with the DeauxMCOC synergy. He can taunt, so he can get those easy heavy attacks, and his stuns can't be diminished. So that is really cool, and he could be a really good matchup for the Red Hulk, but his damage is so low that in these last like 3 minutes I'm talking, he's probably going to get him down to 70%. So I just want to show what could have been done here. If they had just given him a little bit more sauce, he could have been great. Probably not God tier, but he could have been very usable, which is what I was hoping that they would do for him, but they decided to kind of just make him, I won't say bottom tier, but niche tier, I'd say. I mean, he can have his uses, but he's really not anything anybody's going to want to use on the regular. So that's my biggest thought, is that they really could have done something unique, something special with him, made him at least usable in different content, or at least on the level with some of these other science champions that can do what he could do, but they just chose not to. I won't pretend to know their reasons, but I do believe that it has something to do with just, like, you know, the increasing power level of champions, and, you know, they're having to go back and buff these champions now like they said they would, so it's kind of becoming an issue of, yes, they want to buff them, but they can't keep on making them as powerful as some of these recent champions have been. Which makes sense, because you don't want everybody in the game to just have a super powerful champion, because when they release a new one, you have to work for that champion, you have to grind for that champion, and then once you get them, then you can, you know, use them as you see fit, and you can use their advanced kits. So if they were doing that for every champion that was buffed, I mean, like, everybody has a Spider-Man, or most people have a Spider-Man at some higher rarity. So if they're making this Spider-Man as powerful as, say, Shocker, or to a lesser extent Sandman, but that's a topic for a different video, then people would just have a champion super powerful right out the gate that they just got by updating the game. So I get why they don't want to make every buff champion insane. I would have just appreciated a little bit more effort on the Spider-Man end of things. I'm not going to ramble on here for too much longer, but I think this is kind of a sign that, you know, we should stop expecting like these crazy buffs every time, and we should start kind of setting our hopes a little bit more, because I do get it. I'm not a fan of it, but I do understand why they don't want to make every buff champion, you know, a new Magneto or as good as the champions coming out that month, because then you just have access to them. But a little bit more effort on Spider-Man would have been appreciated. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this, because I was definitely a little underwhelmed. I was definitely a little disappointed, especially just based on how popular of a character Spider-Man is, especially the classic version, which is kind of the version that everybody wants. But I am hoping for maybe a rebalance in the future, something. I don't have my hopes set on. I highly doubt it. But at the end of the day, this is his buff. I can definitely see myself using him in a couple scenarios. Nothing crazy. He's definitely got some unique things, but just not a champion that I'm considering ranking up right now. He'll probably stay at 6-star rank 1 for a very, very long time. But without further ado, guys, thank you all very much for watching. Please let me know what y'all's thoughts on the buff are in the comments, and have a great day.